If you're brand new to AI art and finding yourself confused by the terminology, like what the hell are these checkpoints, denoising strength, a LORA? Well, in this video, I'm going to demystify everything and give you a strong foundation for the rest of your AI art learning journey. I'm going to go tab by tab through Automatic 1111, giving you the most helpful definitions and tips along the way. And by the end, you should have enough knowledge to start turning your visions into reality. So let's get started. The very first thing to know about is a checkpoint. This is also referred to as a model. And this is really the heart and soul of Stable Diffusion. So at a very, very high level, what it is this is the result of training a model on a certain data set. That data set includes millions of images with millions of captions in them. So this is going to be, 10,000 pictures of cats with those 10,000 pictures labeled cat. And then rinse and repeat for as many things and types of images as you can think of. The base model for Stable Diffusion, either if we're talking 1.5 or 2.0 or 2.1, was trained on a very broad, diverse set of types of images and captions. So these are good general purpose models that can create all kinds of things. They can create, characters. They can create landscapes. You could even create user interfaces or logos, and they can do it in many different styles: hand-drawn, 3D rendering, oil painting, all kinds of different things. And those different components are based on the labels that these photos were given. Now, you probably already know there are many models out there and they'll be good at different things. And this is determined by the types of data that went into that model. Going over to CivitAI, which is the leading place to download, models and other resources for Stable Diffusion, just looking at some of these models, you can tell, what are these models going to be good at? You have models like Dream Shaper is going to be good at kind of an artistic painterly style. There's more anime focused models, more specific models like an RPG model that'll have lots of characters with swords and shields and armor and those types of things. So it's really important when you're starting out that whatever your vision is, whatever you want to create, you start with a model that will be appropriate for that. So while the base Stable Diffusion models are decent general purpose models, models have evolved a lot in this short period of time. So I really recommend going to CivitAI and downloading some new models for whatever style of image you're interested in creating. Doing that is very simple. Just click into a model, click Download Latest, and drop the model in the folder for your main web UI. Go to Models, then go to Stable Diffusion and save your models here. Once you've got some models you want to use, hit this refresh button and you should see them pop up on the list here. Your model is the single most important setting in all of this. You can see as I'm clicking to these different tabs, the model always stays here because that is the starting point for everything. All right, so next we're going to look through the text to image tab and I'm going to talk through what are the most important things to know here. First is obviously the prompt. This is your text description of what you want to see. Creating good prompts is a whole topic by itself, but at the basic level, what you need to just remember all the time is that as we're writing these prompts, what we're doing is we're asking the model to recall those images that it was trained on. So in those examples of cats, we're typing cat here because the model is going to remember all those images with cats and it knows generally what a cat looks like. So I can run just a very basic generation of a cat here and I get a very generic and pretty crummy looking cat, not a very interesting image. So what you'll learn to do over time is to create more and more complicated prompts that are invoking those types of styles or subject matter that you want to see in your image. So this can be everything from, the actual subject yourself, whether it's a cat or a portrait. Maybe it's a photograph or an oil painting or a hand-drawn sketch. You can do things like describe lighting, soft lighting, brightly lit. You can even describe certain camera types if you want to just hone in on photography. You can even put words in here to describe like a type of camera. You can use words like depth of field or lens flare or any other type of photography type of vocabulary that you know. So at the most basic level in this box, you put what you want to see. The opposite of that, of course, is the negative prompt. This is what you don't want to see. There's lots of kind of magic words in here that will increase the quality, things like putting in low res or lowest quality, low resolution. Things like that will filter out all of the bad images that these models were trained on and give you a little bit better output. Or if you're noticing your generations are showing up with something you don't want to see, then you can put that in this box. In this basic example, I just added in, cartoon, drawing, illustration to get something a little more photorealistic looking, and you can see my generation is more photorealistic. I can swap that out with words like photorealistic, photograph, realistic, and then get something that is completely, illustrated and cartoony looking. These two boxes are going to influence what your output is more than anything else you do in Stable Diffusion, maybe other than the model. So really worth spending a lot of time here learning to prompt, but let's continue on. Next is sampling method and sampling steps. So there's a technical definition for what all of these samplers are actually doing. It's not very important to know precisely how they're different from each other. What is important to know is that there are some differences in these sampling methods, but it's not worth, especially at the beginning, getting caught up in trying to use the best sampling method. All of them are capable of creating great outputs with one caveat, which is the number of sampling steps. So what is a step? A step is one iteration to go from a completely noisy, kind of latent image to the output image. All of these models, the way they work is they start with just a completely noisy, like nothing image. And over time, they're sort of honing in on whatever they're trying to achieve, which is based on the prompt that you created. So in general, yes, more sampling steps is going to be better, but it's really to a certain degree, and that degree will depend on the sampling method that you're using. For your purpose at the very beginning, I would say just stick with this sampling method, Euler A, at 20 steps. You can get perfectly good results with this. You really don't need to spend a lot of time here. As you get more advanced, you may experiment with other sampling methods at higher step counts, which many of them require a higher step count. But also as you're doing this, if you go from 20 to 40, it's taking twice as long to generate an image. So again, stick with 20. You can worry about the details of sampling methods later. All right, the next thing is CFG Scale, Classifier Free Guidance Scale. What this means, just in very basic terms, is how much is Stable Diffusion going to listen to your prompt? At a CFG scale of 1, it's really not going to listen to your prompt at all. It's just going to kind of completely imagine something virtually on its own. At an extremely high scale like 30, it's going to be very, very restricted in trying to listen to your prompt, and you end up getting really weird generations that, to be frank, just don't look very good. So this again is one of those settings that you could really get caught up tweaking this way too much and trying to fine tune things with CFG scale. It's really not worth doing that at the beginning. The safe range for CFG scale is between 6 and 10. Truly, this is another setting that you could just leave it at 7 and be perfectly good. If for some reason you are trying to describe something in your prompt and you're really not getting it in the prompt, you could consider bumping this up a little bit. That may give you a better result. But for the most part, again, don't get too caught up on messing with CFG scale. The seed is the starting point for Stable Diffusion imagining out this image from that noise that it started with. So what does that noise look like when it first starts? A seed of -1 just means every time you generate, it's going to start with a brand new seed and you're going to get a brand new, completely unique image. If you want, you can type your own seed into this box and then you will get, the image for that seed. So this is the image for seed 1, 2, 3 for this particular prompt with this sampling steps and CFG scales. If you went and plugged all of these same settings in with the same seed, you would end up with the same image. The most common way to use this is to click this random button to keep the seed at -1, and you'll be going through your workflow, editing your prompt and generating and just seeing what you get. And then at some point you might get something that it looks pretty good. It's pretty close to actually what you want. So at that point you would hit this reuse seed button. That's going to take the seed from the image you just created and lock it down. So after that, you can make changes to the prompt. And in theory, if you're not making too drastic of changes to that prompt, the output image should be relatively similar. The other way you can use this is to also use batches. So there's this batch count and batch size. You can have like different counts and different size batches, and we'll create like multiple different batches. I haven't found a really good use for that. So I mostly just use batch count. And what you can do is set this to, something like 4, hit generate, and then it will create 4 images for me. And I can just choose the one that I think has the best seed and continue to iterate on that. So here's my batch of 4 images. I can go through, I can, see which one I like the most. Just so happens, let's see, this one looks pretty good. So now when I hit reuse seed, it's going to change the seed to that image. There are some more settings in this page like restore faces, tiling, Hires.fix. Hires.fix, I'll just mention that this is how you upscale an image. So by default, these images are 512 by 512, although you can go larger. Hires.fix lets you make those much, much bigger. So you can multiply it by 2 or 4 and get a much bigger, much higher resolution image. There's also some scripts down here where you can input prompts through a matrix or from a file or a text box. And then XYZ prompt lets you create a grid of different outputs with different components. So you could say, I've got 3 seeds I want to try here and 3 different CFG scales that I want to use and create those here. Again, worthy of probably its own video, but we won't go too deep into it now. So everything I've just talked about, this is not specific to Automatic 1111. This applies to any implementation of Stable Diffusion. So it doesn't matter what UI you're using, the terminology will be the same and the important concepts that I just covered will also be the same. There are some things built into Automatic 1111 that are unique to this UI though, and we can talk about those. These buttons down here let you either open the output directory, save the image, save it as a zip, or you can send these outputs to a different screen, image to image, Inpainting, or extras, which I'll go over in a second. Another unique component is styles, where you can basically build out a library of styles so that, let's say you have a certain prompt that's really good for photorealistic stuff. You can save a style and then it will sort of shortcut adding in a bunch of that language into the prompt. So just as an example, if I wanted to save this cat style, I can hit save, call this cat style, hit OK. And then in this dropdown, I have this option for cat style. So I'm going to remove my prompt here. And then, if I was starting fresh somewhere, I could come down and say, hey, let's start with cat style. And then I'm going to click apply selected styles to current prompt. And it's going to throw that into the prompt. So lots of different clever ways you can use this. There's also some options here like recovering the prompt from your generation. So if I had gone through and just deleted all this, I could click this button here and my prompt will come back up. You can also clear the prompt. And there's also this refresh button for styles if you've created a new style and it's not showing up quite yet. All right, a little more vocabulary while we go to show, hide, extra networks. So networks, this has nothing to do with like networking, like IP addresses and all that stuff. These are ways that you can influence the outputs you're going to create. There's 3 main ways: textual inversions, Hypernetworks, and LORAs. You can think of these as like a refiner for that model. So say you have a model that's really good at creating characters, but you want to create a model that has, Spider-Man in it. What you can do, and what other people have done, is they've created LORAs or Hypernetworks or textual inversions that are a highly trained set of images specific to Spider-Man, and then you can download a file that you can use in this prompt that's going to make sure that Stable Diffusion is putting Spider-Man in that image. I'll make a full video on this at some point, but really what's important to know is that Hypernetworks are completely out of date. People really don't use them. Textual inversions also are fairly out of date. People tend to prefer LoRa type models. These can be downloaded from CivitAI. You drop them in the folder here, and then you use them in your prompt. If you're trying to get a specific character or a specific style to show up in your outputs, LoRas are the way to go. All right, so the next main section to talk about is image to image. Image to image lets you input an image, alter it with a prompt, and then output a brand new image. The prompt is still very important here because it's going to tell the model what you want to see. in this screen, you can just drag and drop images from your file manager down here, and then this will be the starting point for that image-to-image generation. You'll notice the settings down below are largely the same. We still see the same sampling methods, width, height, CFG scale, but there is this setting down here called denoising strength, which is probably the most important setting in image-to-image. This basically tells the sampler how much you're willing to let it create something new on top of the input image that you gave it. So at a very low value, the output image will not change very much. Stable diffusion is not allowed to just change very many pixels there. It'll generally keep the same shape as what you're starting with. At the very highest values, at 1, for example, you'll get a completely different image. It doesn't respect sort of the style or shape or color palette of the input image at all. So there really is a sweet spot for denoising strength as well. For lots of applications, the sweet spot tends to be between like 0.7 and 0.9, although you can go higher and lower depending on what you're trying to do. So let me show you just a very quick example. So let's start with denoise strength at 0.75. And I have my input image here of a cat, and I want to turn this into a dog. So I'm going to take my same prompt, throw it into image to image, but instead of cat, I'm just going to type dog and we'll hit generate. So what's worth pointing out here is obviously we see a dog now, but it follows the same sort of general style as the last image. It's fairly photorealistic looking, and like the ears and the head are in the same shape. This is because it's using that input image as the starting point, and then it's morphing it over time into a dog. So now I'll try changing this denoising strength down. Let's just move it way down to 0.3. So this again is going to tell it, you know, I want to see a dog, but I don't want you to change the initial image very much. You see it looks much more like the cat we started with, but does have some dog-like features. Like this nose here looks like a dog nose now. At even lower strength, we should get hardly any change at all. This is essentially the same image with just very minimal changes. And then at the very highest level, let's go 0.95. I can hit generate and I get a dog. This is entirely different from the source image, but again, still follows kind of the basic outline as the input. If I go all the way up to 1, you know, in this setting, there's a big difference between 0.99 and 1 actually. At 1, when I hit generate, it should give me something completely new. So you can see it's really not following the same shape as we had before. One kind of interesting thing though is that as it's running this denoising, it is using the colors from the input image into the output image. So even though this dog is not in the same, shape as my input, you can see the background is still green. The color of the animal is like roughly the same. So there are still some similarities even at the very highest of denoise strength. Again, the same stuff with the seed applies here. Same with the CFG scale. How much do you want it to listen to the prompt? And then there are these resize modes. This would be for if your input image and your output image are going to be different sizes. How is it going to resize this? Honestly, I find this part very confusing. So read the descriptions to tell me if you can figure out exactly how it works. All right, so within image to image, there are also more options here. And again, these are things that are specific to Automatic 1111. These aren't necessarily general purpose stable diffusion things, so you might not see these exact same options in different UIs. Sketch allows you to draw something and then it's going to image based on that drawing. So what's cool about this is you can take something like really, really simple. I'm going to draw the worst cat in existence. There's my 4 legs there. There's a little tail. Let's give it some ears. And I can put this into Sketch and create an actual cat out of it. So I uploaded my cat sketch. I gave it a denoise strength that is fairly low, and you know what? It's not a realistic cat, but that looks a heck of a lot more like a cat than what I drew. So also in this tab, you can just straight up draw. So if I want to draw, let's draw some grass here, hit generate, and I should start to see that grass show up. I'm going to put standing on grass into the prompt. Again, just keeping this very, very simple. And I'm starting to get sort of my cat image and little bits of grass there as well. There's a huge amount of like playing around with this. Obviously, this is like the 5-second example of what you can do, but you can really go in here and sketch some stuff out. And with a good prompt, that's why we're getting bad results, is because I just haven't built a prompt here. But with a good prompt and a decent starting sketch, you can get some really cool, like creative stuff going on. In like, you know, whatever it was, 30 seconds of playing around, denoise strength 7, you can see I'm getting a cat standing on grass. Great. The next tab we'll talk about is Inpaint. So Inpainting is taking a source image and painting something in on top of that. So as an example, I'll just take a cat image here. Let me drop this in. Here's my cat. And the way this works is that you create basically like a mask, which is just an area where you want it to inpaint whatever you want to see. So again, as just a very basic example, I'm going to draw something here. I'm just going to draw this black square, and this is not for like sketching where you had different colors and different, you know, brush sizes and stuff like this. This is just really for creating the mask. So all I'm telling it is I want you to inpaint, but I only want you to inpaint here. This is also determined by this inpainting area. So right now it's set to, you know, inpaint the entire picture. In my case, I only wanted to inpaint what I have masked. You'll notice there are some more options here, like mask blur, like this is how hard of an edge that mask that you created is going to have, whether to inpaint masked or inpaint like the opposite outside of the mask. And then what should be familiar settings now down here, like for sampling methods, width, height, CFG scale, and again, denoising strength. So in this case, denoising strength is going to say, hey, this area that I painted over, how much am I allowing Stable Diffusion to change the pixels that are covered up here? If I want something brand new, I can just bump this way up. Let's put this up to 95 because I want to create, you know, a ball of blue yarn. There's nothing blue and there's nothing yarny about what is behind this, so I'm totally happy with having this denoise being very high so it can completely put something brand new in there. Once I've generated, you can see my ball of yarn shows up. The rest of the image is unchanged. It has only changed those the area that I masked off. If I were to drop the denoising strength, let's drop to somewhere fairly low, like 0.3, and I generate now, it's still going to try to create that ball of blue yarn, but since I said, hey, don't change my original image very much, I'm really not going to see that ball of blue yarn. As another example, I could take just this cat's eye. I'm going to mask off these eyes, type blue eyes into the prompt box. I'll give it a pretty high denoising strength because I want it to, you know, completely change that eye. Hit generate, and I should see, here's my cat with blue eye. So there's a lot of power in Inpainting. I'm going to make a whole video about this. Subscribe if you're enjoying this style of video where I really take it slow and try to thoroughly explain things. And hopefully that Inpainting video will be coming soon. Inpaint Sketch is kind of a mix between Sketch and Inpaint, where you can input a sketch and then it uses that as the basis for its inpainting. I haven't messed around with this enough, so I won't show you how to use it. Inpaint upload is similar to what we did with Inpainting, but the mask that you create can be, in this version, an image. So you could create that mask in, say, Photoshop, upload it here, and that lets you get a lot more precision on that mask than you can get just like drawing around with your mouse in Stable Diffusion. You can also batch process. So if you've got a bunch of different images that you're wanting to image to image, this is particularly useful for people that are doing animations because you have frames of a video and you want to, you know, process 100 different frames of a video. You can give it an input directory, output directory, and then if you have that mask directory, you can include that as well. And then when you hit generate, it's going to go through everything in both of those directories. All right, so we're rounding out towards the end here. There is an extras tab for, this would be for upscaling single images. This would be for batch processing to upscale images. And same thing, batch processing just from a directory as an input. The PNG Info tab lets you view the data from previous generations. So if I have my folder here with all of my pictures of cats that I've generated, I can drag and drop these onto this screen, and then it's going to show me the parameters that I used to generate that. So I used a positive prompt of cat, my negative prompt was this, and then all of the details that we've talked about all along the way, including the name of the model, the seed of the image, and stuff like sampler type and sampler steps. This is a really great tab because if you're finding images online that other people have created and you want to iterate based on them, you would just drag and drop it into the PNG Info tab, and then you can send this, all of this data, either to image, Inpaint, or text to image. So if I sent this back to text to image, here's my prompt, here's my sampling steps, even my seed, and I hit generate and I should get the exact same image. Checkpoint merger is too advanced for this video, but it basically lets you take two checkpoints or models, or actually three, and like smash them together. And so you can get, that's where a lot of these new models are coming from, is from people merging together different models. You can experiment around with that if you like. The train tab is for creating those different types of embeddings like we talked about earlier, like textual inversions or LORAs. Those can be created here. There's lots of advanced settings. The default settings are fine if you're just starting out. I'll make a video about advanced settings later. And then extensions is something to definitely get familiar with. All I want to show here is that you can get a list of extensions just directly within the automatic 11.11 UI. Just go to the available tab, hit load from, and it's just loading from the main automatic 11.11 GitHub page. And this is a list of all of the extensions available there, which you can install just by hitting install. Some of these are really, really powerful, and I'll be making more videos about that later as well. I hope this has been helpful to some of you out there just beginning your journey. I know when I started, there was so much vocabulary and there was so much to learn at the very start. I wished I had a video like this that just very slowly walked through each of these concepts. So if you're enjoying the video, really appreciate if you like and subscribe, and I will be making many more videos in the future. I'll see you there.